Hey folks, I'm going to share a special video with you today. It's a video of my second 200-inch whitetail. It took me 13 years to accomplish it. It happened back in 2017. A buck I called Smokey, who happens to be right here beside me today. I hope you enjoy the hunt. I've been interested in the outdoors for as long as I can remember, even as a young kid. Then, as I got old enough to go hunting, I started with small game and worked my way up to deer. Shot my first deer back in 1979 at the age of 16. And when I shot that buck, it's like my whole world changed. I forgot about all my other outdoor interests and just focused on whitetails, and specifically for big mature bucks.
Yeah, I'm Dennis Higgins. I'm Don's dad, and they want to talk about my son as he's grown up. He has always enjoyed the outdoors and animals, because I remember coming home from work, I didn't know what kind of animals it would be in the backyard, but he started young, started trapping. He liked to trap animals, and then he got old enough to carry a gun. I took him rabbit hunting, and he enjoyed rabbit hunting with me. And then come deer season, he said, "Dad, I'd like to hunt deer." And I said, "Well, that's okay. We'll try it." So we found a place here not too far from us, and he built a stand and I built one. Come opening day of that first year, that was deer season, well, I was sitting there in a tree, and it had just turned daylight, and I heard him shoot 3 times, and I thought, well, I wonder if he's got one. When here he comes walking up, real slow and easy. He says, "Dad, I just shot a big buck," and not excited or nothing. I about fell out of the tree when he did it. So we managed to get over to get to him, and we dragged him out. We hauled that poor deer all over the country showing people.
When I shot that first buck, I would have been happy to shoot any deer, really. It didn't have to be a buck, but I was blessed that it was a 9-point buck. But I've really always been a trophy hunter to some degree. I just kept raising the bar slowly. I remember as a young hunter, I dreamed that one day I could shoot 2 bucks that would score 125 inches and make Pope and Young. And eventually did that. And somewhere along the way, back in my early 20s, I even gave up gun hunting just for the bow only. It was probably the main reason I did that was because archery season was 3.5 months long, whereas gun season was 6 days in my home state, Illinois. And I just wanted to spend as much time in the woods chasing deer as I could. So, in my early 20s, I just totally gave up gun hunting, and I've been a bow hunter ever since. As I was maturing as a deer hunter, and I was continually raising the bar to shoot bigger and bigger bucks, there was one ultimate goal that I had all along, and that was to shoot a world-class buck. And by world-class, I mean a buck, a typical scoring at least 190 inches, or a non-typical over 200. And I just kept, I'd never really seen a buck like that in the wild, but I always had that dream. And then during the 2004 season, I was sitting in my stand on November 6th, I'll never forget it. And there was a buck that had been chasing does through the brush. I could hear him grunting as he was chasing them does, but I couldn't get a good look at him. And then the does started filing out past my stand, and here comes the buck behind him, and I was just absolutely shocked when the buck that came out was a giant. He had more points than I could even count. And I thought sure I was going to get a shot at him, because those does were working their way right past my stand. And he just stood at the edge of the brush watching them. And the does eventually turned around and went fed back the way they had come. And when the last doe was in the brush, the buck just turned around and followed them right back in. But on that day, I made it my goal that I was going to kill that buck. And to that point in my hunting career, I was just setting a goal as a certain class of bucks. For instance, I wanted to shoot a buck at least 150 inches. But on that day, I started setting my goal to kill individual bucks, and I wanted to kill that one. And so then the race was on. I had to kill that buck, and every hunt that I went on for the rest of that season, I was after that buck. Every morning, every evening, I was in that area hunting that deer. I eventually killed the buck on December 1st, almost a little shy of a month after I'd first seen him. But I really wanted to do things a certain way. I didn't want to shoot a world-class buck that was running by with his tongue hanging out, being chased by guys on a drive or anything like that. I just wanted to shoot a world-class buck, going about his business, doing what big bucks do when they think nobody's watching. And that was exactly what happened on December 1st of 2004. I was sitting in my stand, these other deer passed, and then out steps the giant. And he stopped behind a big tree, and I had to turn around in my stand to shoot. But him stopping behind that tree gave me a chance to do that. And that big tree blocked his vitals and most of his body. He only had to take 1 or 2 steps out, and he was going to be in perfect range for me to shoot. And that's exactly what happened. I sent an arrow right through him, and away he went. I slipped out. Got some friends to come back later and help me retrieve him. I mean, I knew how big he was. I knew it was the biggest buck I'd ever seen alive. He had more points than I even knew, but ended up retrieving him with friends later that evening. He had 20 points, ended up scoring 214 inches. I'd like to say that everybody was happy for my success, but that actually wasn't the case. There was a couple local hunters that had seen that buck earlier in the season. They were after it as well, and when they found out that I had shot it, they'd made some untrue accusations against me, even called in the game wardens, the Illinois Department of Conservation officers showed up, and to make a long story short, they confiscated that buck from me. I'd lived my whole life waiting for that moment. I'd done everything right. I'd passed up unethical shots at that deer when I could have taken them. I waited for the right shot and made a good, clean, ethical kill on the deer. Had permission to be where I was hunting. Everything was 100% legal, but I was accused of wrongdoing. I had to hire an attorney and go to court. 34 days later, I got my buck back. The first day we walked into the courtroom, I got the buck back, but the whole incident kind of left a sour taste in my mouth because, there was people that didn't really know me, and they had heard that I'd been, had my buck confiscated and been accused of doing things wrong. And I made it my vow on that day that I'm going to kill another 200-inch buck, and next time I'm going to do it on video and put all doubters to rest. I had no idea that it would take me 13 years to get that done, but during the 2017 season, I finally got it done. 13 years later, I shot another 200-incher and got this one on video. That 13-year journey to kill my second 200-inch buck was a journey that really taught me a lot as a deer hunter. Up until that point, I was just hunting for bucks of a certain size. A 150-inch buck was my goal. Any buck that came along that was 150 inches, it didn't matter if he was a 3-year-old or a 10-year-old, he was getting shot. And I really started paying attention to the age structure of the bucks, because if a 150-inch buck came along that was only a 3-year-old, that was a buck that I knew had a chance to be really special if he could make it to 5 or 6 years old. So I started passing those bucks, bucks that I would have gladly shot in the past. I also started hunting individual bucks. That first 214-inch buck that I shot was the first time that I ever set my sights on a single buck and hunted a single animal. But every season since then, that's exactly what I've done. I've just looked for the biggest bucks I could find and considered their age and decide if I'm going to let that buck grow to an older age class and hopefully bigger rack, or if I was going to harvest him. And that's what I've done during that 13 years. And there were some real memorable bucks that come along during that time period. One thing I learned was how rare a 200-inch buck is. There was 2 bucks during that 13 years that came really close to the 200-inch mark. One of those was killed on the very property where I had killed my 214, and it was killed the very following season by a good friend of mine who owned the property. And the next year, after I shot my 214, he shot a 196 out of one of my stands. And then a few years after that, I got permission to hunt a new property, and I was getting trail camera pictures of a really nice buck that I thought would push 200 inches. And it just so happened that before the rut even got heated up that first year that I was hunting this buck, a neighbor shot him. That buck was taken to the Illinois Deer Classic that year and officially scored at 199 inches. So he was within an inch of being 200, but just not quite there. So, there was a lot of those bucks that never had the genetics to reach 200 inches. Some were real memorable bucks that lived on my farm. There's a couple in particular. There's one that at 4 years old, he had 13 points, and his rack would have pushed 170 inches. And I let him walk 13 times that year and actually got every one of those 13 passes on video. Next year as a 5-year-old, he was just a little bit bigger. He was probably around 174, 175. I again passed him several times and on video. The next year he was a 6-year-old. He's still in the mid 170s, and I figured at that point he's probably never going to reach 200 inches, so I went ahead and shot him as a 6-year-old. So there was a lot of memorable bucks that came along in that 13 years, but still none of them quite made that magical 200-inch mark. One of the things that really struck me during that 13-year period was how different the personalities are from different bucks. Going into the 2017 season, I had 2 bucks that I thought would push 200 inches that season. One was a buck I called Smokey, the other one was a buck I called Trump, and they were totally opposite kinds of bucks. Smokey had grown up on my home farm. I'd been watching him since he was 2.5 years old. I got to know him so well. He had a small core range that he seldom left. He was visible in the daylight, and he's a buck that I passed every season. When he was 5 years old, the buck was over 180 inches, and I felt so confident that that buck was not going to get killed by anybody because his home range was so small and it was on my property, that I was able to let him go multiple times. I think I passed him 5 times as a 5.5-year-old, scoring in the mid 180s. One of his traits was that he really liked to bed in a tall switchgrass field that I had on my property, and that's actually where he ended up coming out the evening I shot him. But he really liked those tall grasses, and that was just one of his personality traits. I had actually, by the time the summer of 2017 rolled around, and I actually started getting trail cameras and pictures of Smokey and seeing that he really was a 200-inch buck this year, I knew that buck so well by that point that I was going on podcast and giving myself a 95% chance of killing that buck. I was just that confident. In fact, I was so confident that I put up a new 360 hunting blind that summer, and I told the guy that was helping me put it up, I said, I'm going to kill a 200-inch buck out of this blind. I knew where I was going to kill him even. And it took 13 years to get to that point. But when it all came together, it just seemed so simple. I knew I was going to do it, and I knew where it was going to happen at. And it's totally different than any other buck I've ever hunted. I just really got to know Smokey that well. When the 2017 hunting season finally opened, I was ready like I've never been in my life. I mean, I finally had that 200-inch buck to hunt. I knew he was 200 inches, and I knew if he was still alive when season opened, I was going to get a crack at him. The bad thing is I needed a northwest wind to hunt the blind where I thought I would shoot him. And for the first 10 days of season, the wind was out of the south or southwest. And finally on October 11th, we got that first northwest wind. I went to the blind with cameraman Kyle Harmon, and sure enough, Smokey shows up, but he's too far away for us to shoot. He comes out of those tall bedding grasses that he likes so well. So we did not get a crack at him on that hunt, but we did get some great footage.
And here comes the raccoon.
It was 3 or 4 days later on October 15th when we finally got another northwest wind. And again, I felt pretty confident. The conditions were perfect. We sat there for a couple hours and we're seeing a little bit of deer action, not a whole lot. But the sun started to set, and I was thinking, well, it's not going to happen this evening. But I looked out into that switchgrass field, and I could see the grass moving. There was a deer coming towards us and towards the food plot right in front of the blind. But I couldn't even tell if it was a buck or a doe because those grasses were so tall. I grabbed my binoculars and looked, and I could see antler tips. So I knew it was a buck at that point, but I still didn't know which buck. Then when the buck steps out of the tall grass, I knew instantly it was Smokey. And I reached for my bow as Kyle's running the camera, and the only thing I could think of was 13. 13. I just kept repeating 13. I'd waited 13 years for this very moment, for this very shot, and it was about to happen.
Got him. He's down. Unbelievable. Man, I thought it was over for the evening. I thought it was over.
and I looked up and I seen the prairie grass just moving a little bit. And I focused in on that spot and I could see that giant rack just moving that prairie grass. I told Kyle, here he comes, here comes a buck, you know. I grabbed up my nose and I could see it was him. I'll tell you what, I've waited 13 years for this, 13 years. 13 years ago, I shot a 214-inch buck. And I've been trying to get another 200-incher ever since. And I mean, I've searched, I can't even tell you how much I've searched for a 200-inch buck.
You know, after the shot, Smokey ran straight away from us down that clover fire break, and he turned around and looked right back at me one last time, and it was like the end of a long relationship. I'd chased that buck and got to know him for several years. I'd passed him years past, and just before he tipped over, he turned around and looked right back at me, and it was kind of a bittersweet moment, actually. The challenge of chasing him was now over, and you know, it kind of got to me a little bit.
First person I'm going to call is my dad. My dad he took me hunting whenever I was a kid. He wasn't even a hunter himself, but because I wanted to go hunting, he always took time off from his job to take me hunting and everything. And I want him to be here whenever we drag this buck out, walk up on him for the first time. So I'm going to call my dad right now and see if I can get him out here. Yeah, you still down there at the winter roaster?
Yeah.
What time you heading home?
Oh, we can head home about any time, why?
Well, I just shot a giant buck. I wanted you to go with me to get him.
Oh, okay. Probably 40 minutes.
Yeah, that'll be fine.
Yeah, okay.
He's down. We don't have to go look for him. We seen him fall, and I got a camera guy here that's videoing it all. So,
Yeah. Okay.
all right, we'll see you in a little while.
Okay.
All right, bye.
The day he shot him, we was at a winter roast down, probably 35, 40 miles from here, and we just kind of finishing up the winter roast and talking with our friends of ours, and I got a call from Don, and Don says, "Dad, I got a big buck. I need help getting him out of the woods." And I thought, well, that's awful weird, but because he never had me help. But I said, okay, I'll be there. And he said, no need to hurry, but I said, I'll be there just quick as I can get there. So when I arrived up there, he says, I got Smokey, and I just wanted you to be in the film as we retrieve him. I said, well, that's great. Let's go get him.
You know, when I shot my first buck back in 1979, my dad was there with me to help me drag that buck out. And he had not been with me to drag another buck out in all those years. And I decided that summer before I even shot Smokey that if I got that buck, the first person I was calling was my dad. You know, that's exactly what I did. I knew Smokey was down, not 100 yards away, but I wasn't going to go out and look at him until my dad was there. And, you know, I called him and he showed up an hour or so later, and we went and recovered Smokey. And it was really special to have him along. You know, I've been blessed to have great parents, and my dad didn't push me, or my mom, either one. They didn't push me into doing something that they wanted me to do. They let me find my own way in life, and then whatever interest I had, they helped me however they could. I still remember my dad taking vacation time from his job just to take me deer hunting. And you know, without that, I'd have never been able to accomplish all I have in the deer hunting world.
And I'll tell you what, I don't think you could have a boy any prouder than that when he had that big deer. He was grinning from ear to ear, and he was really, and I was proud of him too. I mean, he's as far as I'm concerned, he's a very dedicated hunter, and enjoys it and tries to be as sincere as he can be with it.
What do you think about that?
Well, there he is.
There he is. John says, there he is.
You know what you got to say?
I'm kind of speechless.
It's all right. That doesn't happen often.
Yeah, you got rolled.
He made it to the thickest stuff, did he?
Yeah, he just barely made it back into the cover. See what he lived in. Well, this is a buck at 6.5 years old. I've watched him grow up since he was 2.5. Let him go last year. He scored in the 180s a year ago. Found both his sheds last spring. Actually got his sheds for the last 2 years. But don't really know what to say.
Hopefully bigger than that.
That's what for.
23.5.
24 right there. 24 right on the nose.
Now that I had Smokey killed and my first Illinois buck tag on him, I still had another buck tag and another buck to go after. I'd been watching a buck I called Trump for several years. In fact, he was 7.5 years old last fall when I went after him. He was a buck that was totally opposite of Smokey. He had a big range. I had 2 pictures of him 3 miles apart that were only taken 17 hours apart. He moved mainly at night. There was absolutely no pattern to what he did. He just moved about a big range at night, and I knew he was going to be a tough buck to kill. In fact, right after I'd shot Smokey, my goal for the rest of the season was just to lay eyes on Trump in daylight hours. And that was it. It wasn't to kill him, it was just at some point in the rest of that season I wanted to lay eyes on him in the daylight. Well, so I go out on my next hunt. I'm back in Trump's area. It was my 10th hunt for Trump. And the first 9 hunts, I had not seen a single deer, not even a doe. I was just out in places that you wouldn't expect to see many deer, but that's the kind of places that Trump liked to go. And I knew if I just kept plugging away, sooner or later I may lay eyes on him. So I head out on that 10th hunt. It's a real calm day, and I'm in a fence row overlooking a standing cornfield. And you could have heard a mouse running through that corn at 100 yards. That's how quiet and still it was. But I'm sitting there and I hear a single corn stalk rustle out in that corn. And I knew it was a deer. And I only heard that one rustle, and then it was silent again. And so I knew there's a deer moving. I stood up in my stand. I didn't grab my bow or anything. I just wanted to be standing. The next thing I know, Trump steps out of the corn 30 yards from me and instantly starts walking right at me. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I wanted to lay eyes on him in daylight, here it is. And it's the very first hunt after I just killed Smokey. So I instantly reached down for the video camera, and as I'm doing that, I also glance up to see Trump coming at a fast clip, and I knew there wasn't any time to mess with that camera. It's either mess with the camera or grab the bow. And I decided to grab the bow, and as quick as I could, snapped on the release and come to full draw, and there he is at 15 yards. Put an arrow through him, and off he goes. Now, I wasn't sure about my shot on Trump. It didn't look that good to me. I decided I was just going to back out and come back the next morning. I came back to my good friend and business partner, Kevin Boyer, and also called in a deer tracking dog, Ron Slifer, and his dog, Dio. Had them along as well, because there was 100 acres of standing corn right there, and I knew that it was going to be difficult to find that buck in that corn. But Dio got on the track, and it wasn't long before we jumped Trump. He was still alive, actually. And the chase was on. We jumped him 2 more times and decided to back off for a full 24 hours. Kevin and I decided that before we brought the bloodhound in, we would start on the track ourselves, because Trump didn't look in good shape when we'd last seen him. We didn't think he was going to go all that much farther. He'd lost a lot of blood. By this point, we had tracked him probably 3/4 of a mile, and he had bled the entire way. So we come back the next morning. The plan was for Kevin to take up the blood trail, and I was going to wait on the other end in case he was still alive, and Kevin pushed him out. So Kevin drops me out on the far side of the timber, and then he drives around and starts on the blood trail. I just found myself a place to hide in some brush and sit on a log where I could get a good view of the entire timber in case Kevin jumped Trump. And I just barely sit down and my phone rings, and it's Kevin calling me. He hadn't gone 20 yards from where we left off the day before, and there lay Trump dead in the creek bank. He had the video camera rolling as I walked up to Trump for the first time.
You gotta be kidding me. We just stopped looking right there.
Not 20 yards from him. By not pushing him though.
Unbelievable.
A couple sleepless nights.
Yeah. I already thank God on the way here. I better do it again. I don't even know what to say. I started watching this buck when he was 2.5 years old. I got trail camera pictures back to when he was 2.5. And I'd get his picture every summer. There's a spot that I hunt where there's a bachelor group every year. And he was part of that bachelor group from the time he was 2.5 in that spot. And then last year he was 6.5, between 5.5 and 6.5. He really put on a bunch more extra growth, extra sticker points and such, and so I started going after him. I didn't think I really had a chance because he would move from his summer range in the fall, and he would spend the fall and winter elsewhere, and I had no idea where it was because once he moved, I quit getting his pictures on any of the properties I hunted. So, last season, I spent most of the season, I was hunting for Trump, don't get me wrong. I was hunting for him, but mainly what I was doing was moving trail cameras like crazy, just trying to get a bead on his range, where he lived. And kind of put some of the pieces of the puzzle together. So this year, what was it, 5 days ago, I shot a buck I call Smokey. And I took 2 or 3 days there to take care of Smokey and get pictures taken, get him to the taxidermist, things like that. So I wasn't hunting for about 3 days, and then the first hunt, well, actually the evening I was taking Smokey to the taxidermist, my cell phone went off. I've got some Spartan cameras out in Trump's range, and that camera went off, or my cell phone went off saying I got a picture. So I'm on my way. It's like 6:30 in the evening, still daylight, and my camera goes off, and I got a picture of Trump in daylight during hunting season, and it was right during prime hours, and I couldn't believe it. And I was like, unreal, here he is, he's moving in daylight. The next day, I didn't hunt because my grandsons were here, Wyatt and Walker. They were here from Indiana, and I wanted to spend time with them, so I didn't hunt. But the very next day, I went out. I didn't hunt close to, right on top of where we got the picture a couple days before, but I had a stand, a couple 100 yards away where the wind was perfect for. Finally, just out of the blue, it comes together, and it was the very next hunt after I shot Smokey. And I don't have any idea what Trump's gonna score here, but Smokey scored 206. The very next hunt, I get in a stand and shoot this deer. So, man, other than tell the story, I don't even know what to say. I'm blessed beyond belief. My wildest deer hunting dreams did not even match this. And, I tell young people all the time, chase your dream, but dream big. God's reality is so much bigger than anything we could possibly dream, and I'm experiencing it right here.
I could have never dreamed that I would do what I've done this season, and I give all the glory to God. You know, He made these awesome critters for us to pursue, and they just kind of consumed me. I don't have any other hobbies or passion. It's my family and whitetails. I don't even know what else to say.
You know, for 13 years I had the goal of shooting a 200-inch buck, and never in my wildest dreams did I think that I would shoot 2 bucks on back-to-back hunts that would total 400 inches. It's just, I can't even describe it. You know, one of the really interesting things I learned during this 13-year quest was that some years there's not going to be a buck that I want to shoot. There just isn't. I've raised the bar to such a level that I never even dreamed was possible a few years back. But on those years, you know, I still enjoyed deer hunting. I still enjoyed going out and getting video footage of bucks, learning the patterns of the bucks that are maybe a year or two away from being shooters. So, you know, I've got to the point where I don't have to kill a deer to be having fun deer hunting. It's the challenge of the chase, and that just become, you know, more pronounced over the 13 years. Killing bucks is a lot less important to me now than it was 13 years ago. Now, don't get me wrong, I still want to shoot giants, and if I could shoot a giant every year, that'd be great, but that's just not reality. So, you know, after shooting 2 bucks that total 400 inches of antler on back-to-back hunts, a lot of people ask me, well, where do you go from here? You know, I'll just keep plugging away. I'll keep spending time in the deer woods, learning new bucks, and, you know, hopefully another 200 incher comes along one day.